I want to talk about 5 trade ideas that I really like for playoff teams that are kind of on the fringe of contention and maybe on the outside looking in, but that can probably catapult them into that top tier of contenders, whether that's in the Eastern Conference or the Western Conference. These are some trades that I would like to see happen. And I did go into, I believe it's called Spot Track. I've been using this website for years and somehow do not know how to pronounce it. I always used to think it was Spotrack or Spot Rack, but I believe it is Spot Track. I will not say it again after that, but it's spotrac.com. I believe that they have the best trade machine when you're looking at contracts and all that. So that is what I used. And most of these trades either checked out or will check out when players are eligible to be traded, because some players were re-signed over the summer and are not eligible to be moved until January 15th. So I wasn't able to check my work there, but I believe I'm either there or very, very close on making the salaries line up. So the first trade that I believe that 2 teams should make, and I feel really strongly about this one. This is a Giannis Antetokounmpo trade, so this may be the most exciting one that I talk about all throughout this video. But I think that the Bucks should trade Giannis to the Atlanta Hawks, and I think that they should take back Kristaps Porzingis, Zachary Risachet, Asa Newell, 4 first-round picks, including that highly discussed 2026 unprotected pick from the Pelicans, which is the worst of the better pick of the Pelicans and the Bucks. So it could be Milwaukee's pick back, if they finish with a worse record than New Orleans, it could be their pick. But that is a pick that very much has a chance to be a top 5 pick in a loaded 2026 NBA draft class. And I think this is the trade that the Bucks should be targeting, because I think that Milwaukee, everyone talks about this trade and they think they should be getting Jalen Johnson or Trae Young, but they're not going to get Jalen Johnson. There's just no way that the Hawks move a player that talented, that young, that proven at his age. I just don't see it happening. I mean, Giannis is a spectacular player, but he is getting up there in age himself. He deals with a lot of injuries and he's a big money player. Bringing him in is just a massive change to everything that your team is doing. I don't see them making a move like that. And if you're Atlanta, I think you want to have Trae Young on the roster when you are acquiring Giannis. So I don't think you want to move Young in the deal. And I don't think the Bucks really want to acquire, Trae Young either. It's just a player that wouldn't really be on their new timeline. I think that the best thing that the Bucks can do in this type of trade specifically is you get Porzingis. That's an expiring contract, immediate cap relief next summer. You get Risachet, the number 1 pick 2 years ago, a player that looks like he's going to be a very good 3-and-D player for a very long time. And if you can kind of get more out of him, maybe you can, because you'd be giving him more developmental opportunities. You go for it. But at the same time, either way, like, this is a player that is 20 years old, has been very, very productive, and he's going to be a part of whatever you're doing in the next phase of your franchise for a long time to come. I mean, that's a very valuable asset. And Newell is a player that's just a very athletic, big, that can finish at the rim, can make some plays for others. He's, flashed some decent touch. Maybe eventually he becomes a stretch player, but I do think that's a player that will be productive for a very long time. And it's a first-round pick from last season. So, you're getting kind of like 2 first-round picks there, but the jewel of this trade is that pick in next year's draft. But I do think this trade is more of like a get-out-of-jail-free option. I know that this team, sunk assets in, cutting and waiving Damian Lillard's salary, and then they signed Miles Turner too. So the cap situation is not going to be great in the near future, but you definitely help yourself a little bit by bringing in Porzingis, letting him walk in the offseason, immediately freeing up some space, and you bring in 2 impact young players to add to your rotation to develop for the long term, and then some really valuable first-round picks, 4 first-round picks to be exact, but 1 very valuable one next year. I don't know that anybody else can beat that offer. I think you're going to hear a lot about, Giannis wanting to go to New York. There's nothing the Knicks can do to top this offer. And I don't think that any other team besides, the Spurs, Rockets, or Thunder can beat it. And those teams are not going to be making a move for Giannis. So I think that the Hawks should put that offer on the table, make Milwaukee say no. If they say yes, you're talking about a team with Trae Young, Dyson Daniels, Jalen Johnson, Giannis Antetokounmpo, and Onyeka Okongwu. I think that easily becomes the number 1 team in the Eastern Conference. You have Nickeil Alexander-Walker off the bench, potentially closing out games, instead of Dyson Daniels, because it gives you a little bit extra playmaking, a little bit more shooting. But that becomes the best 6-man, rotation in the entire league. And you still have a few other players there in Atlanta. But I believe that that's, a team that can, contend for an NBA title. I'm not as low on Trae Young as other people are. I watched the guy score 35 points on 15 shots against the Bulls very recently. So I think that this is a game that that they should be trying to keep Trae Young in a trade. I think they should try to make this offer. It might seem underwhelming to the public at first. I think this is a good trade for the Bucks, though. I think that offers you flexibility moving forward. You get a lot of picks. You become, pick positive in the short term. So I really like this one. The next trade, this is one of the ones that I mentioned will not be able to happen until January 15th. The Warriors moved Jonathan Kuminga finally. One unprotected first round pick and one top 10 protected first round pick to the Pacers for Benedict Mathurin and Obi Toppin. There are rumblings in Indiana that the Pacers are not going to be willing to pay Mathurin what he wants with his extension, and they are starting to listen on trades, but it sounds like they want to be blown away. I wonder if it'd be difficult for them to pass up on an unprotected first from Golden State and, a future first, even if it's one that doesn't convey. I just think that getting picks is really valuable for this team right now. The Pacers are trying to kind of reload and see what this team is going to look like around Tyrese Halliburton moving forward. And I think that taking a swing on Kuminga, giving him a season to kind of see if he can figure things out. If it doesn't work out, you can move on. He has a team option next summer. This is a player that obviously, has fallen out of favor in Golden State. Maybe he would fall out of favor in Indiana. It's not that different. It's, a team that requires, quick ball movement, quick, reads, and just selfless play overall. So maybe it won't work there, but I do think that getting the picks is worth it if you do see yourselves moving on from Mathurin in the future. I think that that's, what you should be looking for if you're Indiana is, some swings at players that maybe do fit in the future. And I don't know that, this would be a trade that would please a player like Tyrese Halliburton, but so much has changed because of that Achilles injury that it's just hard to get a read on what the Pacers are going to be doing moving forward. But I do think that grabbing a pick from a team like Golden State that's older and could fall apart in the next couple of years might be worth doing. So I think that that's where they might be wanting to look. And for Golden State, this is where I really love the move. I just think that you're adding, two players that can absolutely help this current Warriors team. You take one more swing at putting a roster around Steph Curry that can maybe, win a title. I think that this Golden State team is fantastic defensively. I've talked about that a lot on Hardwood Handicappers, but adding Benedict Mathurin, a player that can score at all three levels, is a fearless player late in the game, gives you a little bit of size at the two guard spot. I think that helps. And then Obi Toppin, who is injured right now, gives you a floor spacing big, someone that can play with Draymond Green or can play, some small ball five without Draymond because he is a good rim, finisher. I think this is a guy that can help. You add two rotation pieces to the team right now, but you also add ones that are young enough to help the post Steph Curry Golden State Warriors, whatever that's going to look like. I think Mathurin is a player that can be a 22 to 25 point per game scorer in this league. So you're getting a player with high upside. You're just going to have to pay him over the summer, which maybe not a lot of teams will want to do. But I do think that this is a trade that might help Golden State crack that top, tier in the Western Conference and just kind of give Curry a chance in any series he plays moving forward. Maybe you're not right there with OKC, you're not right there with Denver, but I think that with this roster, you give Curry a puncher's chance in a 7-game series. All right, now we're getting to the Clippers stuff because I have 3 trades now. I said I have 5. The final 3 all include Los Angeles. We are rating this Clippers team like, teenagers rating their parents' liquor cabinet in high school. I think that this is a Clippers team that absolutely needs to move on from this current core, especially with the news that Ivica Zubac is now out for 2 to 4 weeks. Like, it just doesn't seem possible that this Clippers team is going to find a way into the actual playoff picture. Maybe they can find a way into the play-in picture, but I don't think that that's going to happen. And we are starting to hear some rumors from some big newsbreakers that they are going to be listening on James Harden. And if you're listening on James Harden, you should be listening on everybody else. But let's start with Harden because I think the Timberwolves should trade Naz Reid, Mike Conley, Rob Dillingham, and a protected first-round pick for James Harden on January 15th when Naz Reid becomes trade eligible. This trade is a little bit off. It'll require some matching of salaries with some end of rotation guys, but it's very, very close to working. And it's a trade that absolutely can work if they figure it out with like those end of rotation guys, as I just mentioned. So you could find the salary cap fillers to make this work. But with the Clippers, I think that you have to move on. I just mentioned that. So why not bring in a guy like Rob Dillingham, who has been, a high, potential player throughout his career and somebody that was awesome at Kentucky, and it just has not worked out in, Minnesota, where they are contending, in the Western Conference every year. They can't really afford to try to like let him play through mistakes. I think you can do that if you're the Clippers and all of a sudden you become a developmental team and a rebuilding team. I think Dillingham becomes a nice piece and a pick becomes a nice piece. And Naz Reid is not a player you probably want on a rebuilding team, but he is younger. He's 26 years old. He's a very good scorer at the 5 or a small ball 4, or not a big 4. But I think this is a player that you just kind of reset your timeline a little bit. Harden's an older player. Bringing in Reid, a 26-year-old, at least you get a little bit younger. Maybe not as young as you would want, but I think this is a trade that makes a lot of sense because you get the pick, you get Dillingham, you get younger with Reid. So I think it makes sense if you are the Clippers. For Minnesota, it's not a perfect fit, but you bring in an elite ball handler and scorer in Harden, somebody that is absolutely awesome at bringing teams and making them top 5 offenses. He has done that all throughout his career, and this Timberwolves team is great defensively. They would remain great defensively even with Harden in the picture, but you become that much dangerous in the postseason if you're rolling out a backcourt of Harden and Edwards. That's just going to be very difficult for opponents to stop, and you're doing it at the cost of a protected first-round pick and 1.5 rotation players, and that's putting it generously because Mike Conley and Rob Dillingham, they're not giving you productive minutes in the postseason. Reid is the only one that's doing so. The other 2 are giving you maybe spot minutes here or there. So I think this is a swing worth taking if you're the Timberwolves. Bring in Harden, give your team a shot with an elite playmaker in the backcourt. And you also kind of clear up a logjam in the front court where I think at times it gets a little bit awkward with Randall, Gobert, and Reid. So you move forward with just Randall and Gobert, and you add just a dynamic, shot creator in the backcourt in Harden, and someone that maybe is a little bit disappointing in the postseason, but if you are playing him next to Ants, you're probably talking about a player that's going to be defended by the lesser of whoever the backcourt defender is on any team. So maybe that helps him kind of cook a little bit in the playoffs. Trade number 4 is where I'm getting a little weird with it. I am going to be putting the Celtics in a trade, and Boston is now number 3 in the Eastern Conference. This team has proven enough, in my opinion, to believe that they should be buying and bringing Jason Tatum back in March or April. Tatum apparently really wants to play this season. I think in a perfect world, the Celtics would be holding him out. The Celtics front office, that is. I think that they don't want to play Tatum. They want to play things pretty safe with him. But when is the Eastern Conference going to be more open than this? Like, why not take a minor shot, especially if you're doing it, in a trade that, helps you in the future too? And that brings me to the Celtics trading Anthony Simons, his expiring contract, Hugo Gonzalez, Baylor Shireman, a 2027 first-round pick, and a protected 2028 San Antonio first-round pick to the Los Angeles Clippers for Ivica Zubac, Derek Jones Jr., Kobe Brown, and Cam Christie, the last 2 players being really nothing but salary fillers. But this is an Ivica Zubac trade. Obviously, I mentioned before, he's out 2 to 4 weeks. It is getting late early in Los Angeles, but I think that this is a really good opportunity for the Celtics to maybe get their center of the future. And Zubac is a player that is a perennial defensive player of the year candidate. Not somebody that can probably win because Victor Wembanyama, as long as he is healthy every year, will probably win this award. And obviously this year is one of the ones where he's not. But I do think this is a player in Zubac that will contend for defensive player of the year every year because he is so good as a rim protector, just kind of getting his body in the right places, getting up with verticality. He's not the most athletic player in the world, but he finds ways to block shots and anchor defenses. And I think that he's exactly what Boston needs in the middle. And I think that Derek Jones Jr. is a player that can also help because he's a great defender on the wing and someone that can finish in transition, that can cut to the basket, can occasionally knock down threes. These are 2 players that make your team very, very interesting, in the postseason. If you can bring Tatum back a little bit later in the year, you're talking about White, Jaylen Brown, Tatum, Zubac as, maybe the best foursome in the Eastern Conference. And then you would still have Pritchard, Cato, Walsh, Hauser, Derek Jones Jr. I think this is a really good trade if you're the Celtics. I think that you have to ditch this, gap year concept and try to make a swing because, like I said, I think you have a real chance to win the East this year. I think just getting into the dance with Tatum and Zubac gives you a real chance to beat, New York, Cleveland, Detroit, whoever these teams are. I think this would be a really scary Boston team. So I would like to see it. And if you're the Clippers, it's tough to swallow trading Zubats. Like, this is such a good player, and somebody that is young enough to be a part of whatever the next phase of the Clippers is. But it's a player that if you can get 2 picks for him, and Gonzalez, who was a first round pick last year, I think you do it, and then you get some extra cap flexibility in the form of Simons being an expiring contract. So I really like this trade for the Clippers as well. If they do end up having to move Zubats, which I think that it's going to become a decision for them in the next couple of weeks, I think this is an interesting one. The final trade, which is one I've talked about on my podcast, Hardwood Handicappers, before, it's the Pistons moving Tobias Harris, Ron Holland, Jaden Ivey, and a 2026 first round pick for Kawhi Leonard. I just think that this might not be the favorite destination for Kawhi and his uncle Dennis. I don't think that they'd want to move to Detroit, but it's a short-term move. Like, I think that Kawhi only has 1 year left on his deal after this year. Move to Detroit. It's cold, whatever, but you have a chance to win a title. Then you could sign somewhere else next year, whatever, you're a free agent next. But the Pistons, I've mentioned them a lot as a Lauri Markkanen suitor on Hardwood Handicappers, and I think that is the player that in an ideal world they would get. But I do think that Utah wants to see this, rebuild through with Keontae George and Lauri Markkanen. I think they want to see what those two can become and if they could put a playoff team around those two as early as next season. So I don't think they're going to put Markkanen on the trade market this season. That means I think you have to pivot if you're the Pistons, and I think that Kawhi Leonard is a really good fit there. You're adding a 25-point per game scorer that does not hurt you on defense whatsoever. I think that Cade Cunningham, Kawhi Leonard, and Jalen Duren become, an awesome trio that could compete with anyone in the Eastern Conference. And you keep Asar Thompson, you keep Beef Stew, and a couple of these valuable bench guys. I just think this becomes an awesome Detroit team. And if you're the Clippers, it's another one where you're getting some developmental guys like that you're taking, chances on, redraft guys like Ron Holland and Jaden Ivey. I think that Holland could be an awesome player in the NBA, just what he shows on the defensive end and then what he can do as a finisher at the rim. I think if you figure out the jumper, you're talking about a really high-level starter for a very long time. And Ivy just needs to get healthy, but we've seen that he could be a dynamic scorer in this league. And a 2026 first-round pick is valuable. Tobias Harris is, a proven veteran that's, a good locker room presence, somebody that can give you 15 points per game and just, consistent nightly production. I think that's a good trade for the Clippers, and I think that it's a great trade for the Pistons. So those are 5 trades that I'd really like to see. I think it's 5 teams that need to make moves in order to really solidify themselves as contenders. You could argue the Pistons are kind of there in the Eastern Conference right now, but I don't think that they're there when you're talking about an NBA title. They need to make a move in order to get into that conversation. So 5 trades from 5 playoff teams and 5, fringe playoff contenders that I think could turn them into legitimate title contenders, and 3 trades with the Clippers, who I need to blow it up, and you bring in a bunch of assets. The salary stuff becomes a little bit harder to work out when you're talking about making 3 moves, but they're probably not going to make all 3. It's probably, one of them, probably none of them, to be honest. These are just 3 dream trades, and I'm just a basketball nerd, a basketball junkie that wants to see some of this stuff. But yeah, I love talking about trade stuff. If you like to hear more of this, it is on Hardwood Handicappers. We will do more of it. It's a betting show, but I always do big picture NBA stuff when I can. So that's all for today. That's all for Hardwood Handicappers. Make sure you join us on the Tuesday show for some more picks, and then we'll talk about the Christmas slate on Wednesday. I'm very excited. It's a great time to be an NBA fan. Good luck with your bets tonight, and hopefully we keep winning.